online in the framework of the Values Project, volunteering activities to leverage urban and European social integration of migrants. So the running thread of this year's conference looks into the way cities build their network of support with volunteers to try and build an inclusive society. And had life been normal and had we not been in a lockdown crisis where travel has become non-essential, we would be all together in Nuremberg. But instead, we're all together online for the first of 4 workshops, which lead up to the virtual conference on the 2nd and 3rd of December next week, which I hope that you are all registered to. I will be there. My name is John Paul Judson. I will be the moderator of these workshops and of the online conference next week. And I have to say, I'm approaching this topic with a very open mind. Beyond just being a citizen, I have no expertise or legal understanding of the different rights of different migrant groups, but I certainly feel that as a society we have a responsibility towards all groups, and in particular the most vulnerable. And I hope that you will also be approaching this workshop and these topics with an open mind. The idea is that we have an interactive session, a working session. There will not be any presentations as such today, so feel free also to intervene, comment, question, raise your issues as they come along. You can obviously use the chat function inside Teams, but also before intervening, just click the raise your hand button at the top of your Teams application. When you click that little hand, it allows me to know that you have something that you want to say, and I can then request that you intervene. For the rest of the time, please keep your microphones on mute. We will also be checking that there's no interfering sound as we go along, but the best is that each of you do that. So today's topic is about protecting the rights of migrant children and youth, and we'll be looking at good practices and challenges. Children representing one of the most vulnerable groups of migrants. They can suffer violence, abuse, discrimination, exploitation, trafficking, but migrant children are above all children and represent a specific obligation for society. So when it comes to their integration, they can find themselves socially marginalized. They will have difficulty with certain types of services. So how are cities working with other actors in this field to develop solutions to respond to those major problems that children and young migrants are facing? So in this workshop, we will be asking some questions: how to ensure the rights of unaccompanied migrants, how to encourage youth participation and empowerment, what are the good practices at the local level, what are the main challenges faced by cities and possible solutions, and how are cities and NGOs cooperating in this field, and what are the lessons learned from this cooperation across Europe. At the end of the workshop, I would be happy if each of you would have had an interesting sense of a case study in Europe that maybe questions the way you organize yourselves or gives you additional ideas, and that maybe we all go home or stay home with a clearer understanding of the main challenges in this field. Okay, are we good? That was for an introduction. So to kick off, before we go into the best practices, I would like to just stay a little bit at the level of the challenge. So we have here Zoltán Somogyvári, who's Senior Legal Officer at the Refugee Program Hungary Helsinki Committee. Zoltán, can you, just to kick us off here in this discussion, can you give us a bit of a general overview of the legal framework within which cities would be operating to protect young migrants?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. Actually, the pronunciation of my name was, well, and so thank you for organizing this, and also for inviting us. Just really a brief overview. At the Hungarian Helsinki Committee, we are mostly lawyers working in the asylum cases of unaccompanied minors, and of course adults as well, and families. But today the topic is minors, and specifically unaccompanied minors is what we have experience in. And we so about briefly about reception conditions and schooling. But first and foremost, it's very important that there is a best interest determination of minors who arrive, not only in the beginning of their procedures, but basically continuously. It's very important to have a best interest determination in the beginning, but also regularly, actually. Also, if they change places, for example, they go from one institution to the other, or they get rejected in their asylum case, there has to be a new assessment. Regarding reception conditions, it can be the case that they go to an institution. It can be a closed or an open institution. Actually, it's against the law. It's against international human rights standards to detain migrant children just because they are migrants. And we see that it's a good practice, it's a good case law of the Strasbourg Court, the European Court of Human Rights, that they continuously rule that the detention of migrant children is never in their best interest, whether they are in a family or alone. Arriving without company. And even if there is a family, it's such a big human rights violation that even if children come in a family with parents, the detention of children would be an Article 3 violation, which is an absolute right, it's an absolute prohibition. They are treated inhumanely if they are detained. And the parents, the detention of their parents would not be an absolute human rights violation. They would be, the Strasbourg Court would say that it's an illegal interference with their right to family life regarding the parents. But regarding the children, it's much worse. It's actually inhumane treatment, their detention. But actually in Hungary, and of course we will get into the details a bit later, in Hungary, in the past 3 years, it was the case that even unaccompanied minors between the age of 14 and 18 were detained in the so-called transit zones, which were just really inhumane treatment. But the better case is that they are not detained, but are put in institutions, and even better if they are sent to foster families and foster parents. It's, at least in my country, in Hungary, foster families are an option now, but it's not encouraged for different reasons. But actually, that's the best situation for unaccompanied minors if they are in a family setting already. So reception conditions can be can mean a really huge challenge. Of course, the other challenge is education and schooling, and just a couple of sentences on that. It's very important is the compulsory age of schooling in a country. In Hungary, it would be 16. So after 16, children are not required and not obliged to go to school. I think 16 is not good. We are advocating for at least the age of 18. And schooling is a challenge also because unaccompanied minors are regularly obliged or feel urged to work, to start working, because many of them actually owe money to relatives who are in the countries of origin. And it's also because of that reason that the state must, and cities, if they have the power, they must organize proper schooling and education so that children, that it's a better future for them, as opposed to working in a gyros shop, for example, which would be the typical case of a 17-year-old unaccompanied minor refugee in Hungary. So I thought that these would be my initial sentences, and of course later on we can continue.
Okay, yeah, because you're basically saying that detention can have a pretty broad definition, let's say, and I guess that pressure must be then felt by cities as one of the big places where a solution will need to be found. So can you just say a few words about how cities then interact with the national level, where there will be measures that are imposed, I suppose? The relative autonomy, let's say, of cities in this respect.
Sure. What I can talk about in more detail is our Hungarian cities, because there is no European legislation on the autonomy of the level of autonomy of cities, because it's something that the member states can regulate themselves. And unfortunately, the Hungarian cities are gradually less and less powerful. This is because the government are gradually taking away rights and powers of cities. And also we actually had elections last year, municipal elections, and we have a new mayor in the capital of Hungary, in Budapest, which is an oppositional figure. And also actually major Hungarian cities now have oppositional mayors, which is great, but actually they get punished. Basically, us, the voters, get punished for electing oppositional mayors who are not in the political party of the government. And not only their rights and powers are taken away, but also now, actually during the COVID times, some of their money sources are also taken away. But they can still do certain things also in Hungary, for example, regarding housing, so which is super important regarding unaccompanied minors. Cities, if they want to, they can offer accommodation, reception centers, children's homes to children. So that's one example. But regarding schooling, for example, Hungarian cities, they do not have rights regarding primary, secondary schooling and higher. So it really depends on the individual country what cities can do or can't do.
Yeah, it's interesting because at the end of the day, I suppose it's countries that will be held accountable and not cities. And yet cities can do more than countries, but it's, yeah, in a kind of relative autonomy. Okay, maybe we can continue a little bit on this thread. Olsi Dudumi, you are a Regional Innovation and Youth Empowerment Officer at Terre des Hommes. Can you also comment a little bit on this sort of picture on governance between the national and the city level, and some of the challenges that cities will be facing to protect migrant youth?
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting, and it's really nice to be here. And thank you, Zordan, for the summary, very nice summary that you had. So I work for Terre des Hommes as an innovation and youth empowerment officer, especially precisely for the children and youth in migration program. So for us, every child who is in migration or affected by migration is our target group. This means, and that's where I want to lead then to how we see this governance, because it's a different level of impact, I think, from the governments on a different target group, on a different type of, let's say, migrant. So there is a distinction between those cities, let's say, or countries where young migrant children are hosted or have arrived as their final destination, in comparison to those young youth and children in, let's say, transit zones or transit areas or countries like in Greece, where a city like Thessaloniki can provide different type of services and different type of interventions, in contrast with, let's say, city of Bristol or Nuremberg, where children and youth are already settling, are already being hosted. So it's a different type of services. And I think for us at Terre des Hommes, this is very important when we conceptualize, when we work towards different type of intervention and activities to protect children and youth, of course. And then it's again another question like unaccompanied children and children with families, children and youth with families. So it's a different type of intervention there as well. But all in all, encompass what we work towards and what our main aim in terms of like to bridge the gap in the different governance, like national, city, where city can provide something, where city does not provide something, where cities like Zoltan hinted upon sometimes don't have the opportunity, stuff, political reasons. Then it's we see our role way much more important to try and bridge this gap with different interventions, with different initiatives, with different projects, and all of them are under this what we call youth empowerment or children and youth empowerment. When I say youth, sometimes it's everyone for us. Everyone until the age of 24 is between the category of children and youth empowerment that are in migration or affected by migration. For us, youth empowerment is part of this general approach that many NGOs are taking nowadays to foster skills necessary for these beneficiaries, for these target groups, to have an active and primary role in their personal and communal development. So it's both individual and towards the community. And for us, youth empowerment is part of this other. So it's very much interlinked to what we work and our primary goal, the resilience of children and youth, which means for young people and children, especially those coming from who are who were affected by migration in any way or another, to their capacities to adopt. So resilience, that's what we mean for the capacities, to build capacities that children and youth adopt, cope and adapt to cope and transform their environment. And within this resilience, we work towards youth empowerment, which is very much interlinked because, of course, youth empowerment or empowering youth means building on these three basic stuff. And there we see, like, to bridge our gap, let's say, in this kind of idea of governance, national, local, municipal, but even going further down to like the community. So for us, I think to go a step further from what Zoltan said, that we go further down to the local community, to the neighborhood, to their smaller community, because that's how you kind of build, empower and build resilience of children and youth, not directly through bridging this gap of national and city-wise.
Yeah, and you mentioned this difference between place of destination and place of transit, and this will have many different challenges.
Yeah.
But actually, how does it work? So how does a youth, a young migrant, end up in a city, in a country? Is that an organized, or is that a chaotic process?
Sometimes it's a very much organized by the child or the youth, let's say, himself, with a family, or with whom he or she are traveling. So they have an idea of where to go. There is, like, another local community from back home who are in a certain city, so they will offer more support. It's this idea of anyone building this resilience through community support. So sometimes it's very much not organized but thought upon, and sometimes it depends on the opportunities that you can have. Looking at how Europe nowadays is, closing slowly every other border. So sometimes you want to go somewhere, you have a dream, you have something, but you don't achieve it, and you are stuck in Greece, let's say, for over 2 years. And what do you do as a young person or as a family with children? You try to develop and to live there. Yeah. So I think it's a different thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be interesting, and I hope we'll be hearing from cities during this meeting. I mean, maybe there's also cities that are developing an attractiveness, let's say, because of the services they're developing. So it would be interesting to hear a little bit about that. We can then go straight to a city. We have Bristol here with us this morning. Zoltan was mentioning this idea of the foster families as being one of the key, services that one can develop. Liz, your corporate parenting manager at the city of Bristol. Can you maybe say a few words about how Bristol is organized in this respect?
Yeah, sure. I might just start by explaining what corporate parenting means, which is a concept we've had in the UK for around 20 years. And it's a term which is used to describe the city or the collective responsibility of the city for children in its care. So obviously a child who is unable to live with their birth family, whether that's because they're an unaccompanied migrant or for whatever reasons of abuse or neglect, then they'll be looked after by a foster family. I'm just remembering my train of thoughts. Oh yes, and that foster family will of course be the main carers, providing that sense of love and safety and belonging. But we also need as a city a collective responsibility to ensure that young person can achieve their potential and have positive outcomes. So the responsibility of schools and education, of a healthcare setting, of NGOs, very important. To make sure that the children that the children have equality of access and inclusion, and sort of level out that playing field, if you will, for people who can grow up in their own families, and that's particularly true for unaccompanied migrant minors. Perhaps Jerez, I might ask you to speak a little bit about foster families. Would that be okay?
If you just unmute yourself. Jerez.
So sorry about it. Doesn't my sound come now?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Thanks for all of you for inviting me here. I'm a migrant. I'm one of those migrants who immigrated to this country until 2016. And when I was moved to Bristol, I think I was quite lucky when I was moved to Bristol, because Bristol is quite active city in the UK, where there is a lot of opportunity for young migrants, where they can benefit from it. When a new young migrant come to Bristol, especially those young migrants who are under the age of 18 years old, they have an opportunity, which is they can stay with the foster family, because they have just been gone through lots of traumatic experience while they were on their own way to the UK or to any other countries. No one knows what they've been through. They need lots of support and help from someone who they can rely on. Maybe those young migrants, they never grew up by themselves. Maybe they grew up with a family, with other people who they have been dependent on. They just need a lot of help from foster family. Like me, when I came to Bristol, before I turned to 16, I had a meeting with my social workers. They asked me when I turned to 16, do I want to stay with the people who are similar to my age, or do I want to stay with the foster family? It was my choice to stay with the foster family, because I was underage at that time. I couldn't rely on myself, like making an appointment, like a lot of sort of things like cooking, and I needed someone to hold my hand and introduce me to somewhere where I don't know. It's not really easy. It's not really easy beginning for young migrants when they immigrate to a country or city, because they are in shock. It was quite scary for me, because I from a very scary. I thought I'm still facing lots of scary situation, but thankfully it didn't turn out like that. Yeah, and yeah, since then I've been staying with the foster family, and I have benefited so much by staying with them. Yeah.
And so on this question of the place of destination, how did you come to Bristol then? How did that step get organized between getting to the UK and getting to Bristol?
Yes, when I immigrated to the UK, the first place I arrived, it was London. It wasn't my choice to come to Bristol. It was social services' choice to send me to Bristol, because there was a thing about if anyone, when I was at that time, it was 2016, and there was at that time the social services had made a decision. Anyone who come to the UK after the August, they are not allowed. They can't be staying in London. They have to be sent to some other cities. And I was one of those migrants who was sent to Bristol.
Okay, so so you're within a network of care, let's say, at that point, and
Yes.
and that's how you're affected to a certain city. And then from Bristol's perspective, how does that work? And once what's the relative role of the city then versus the national services operating in your city?
So when a young, sorry, Harris, shall I mention about so when a young person arrives in Bristol, they're assessed by 2 social workers from a particular team within Bristol. And if they may have an age assessment, if there's any uncertainty about their age. And if they're deemed to be under the age of 18, then the local authority has a duty to make sure that all their needs are met. So their housing needs, their care, education, that sort of thing. And then they'll be accommodated under a section of our Children Act, and they will be normally placed within a foster family. If they're a little bit older, say 17, then they might go into supported accommodation with other young people their age, but normally they would go into a foster family. And then they would access the same system that a child who's brought up in the care system in Bristol would access. So and then when they leave care, they would also access that same system.
Okay. Okay, and so what kind of if I go back to then Zoltan and Olsi in this context, how then can NGOs get support from the local authorities? There's sort of an interaction here between the local authorities that are linked with the national authorities in the formal structure, and then there's the network of care that is organized around that. What kind of support then do you see important from the city to the network of NGOs operating? Zoltan, maybe first.
Sure. Well, it's already great support if the cities, the municipalities let us cooperate with them. So I just wrote, emails last week to the Budapest municipality and another municipality offering our services, and that we go there with a refugee woman, and that we want to train the workers, the staff of the municipality, if they let us. We want to exchange experiences, and we will see if they let us do that or not. That, of course, depends on how courageous, how brave the individual mayors and their staff is or are. So that's really because what I said in Hungary, cities they cannot really do so much. This is what most importantly they can do, accept the willingness of NGOs to do something for them, and explain the mayors that actually migrants, refugees, they are also voters at local elections, so they should care about their voters. And also in terms of housing, they have, as I said before, they do have some leverage, they do have some room within they can move in and offer social housing to refugees. But of course, as Osti said as well, politically, especially in Hungary, it's not very encouraged for mayors to be nice to refugees. But the good news is that there are brave mayors, and individual, courage, individual braveness will always be an important factor.
Olsi, a reaction also on that?
Picking from Zoltan, and I personally live in Budapest as well, despite the fact that I work for the regional office here, which we collaborate and work with our offices in Europe. But picking from Zoltan and from experience, if a municipality wants to collaborate, that's the first step. And then we, as NGOs, talking from Terre des Hommes perspective, we are complementary into the work that any city or any locality or any community does to care for especially unaccompanied but children and youth. So we are there to complement their care, to even make it more fruitful, and to really work towards the resilience of children and youth, and work toward better integration of young people who are kind of the active changers of any narrative or future. So we are not, and when I talk about Terre des Hommes, is that Terre des Hommes does not work alone. We work with local NGOs. So we're not going to a city and working alone. We work in cooperation and in collaboration with many different other local actors. So it's a whole, so collaborating with NGOs, it's a whole different aspect. And for us, how we see our cooperation, if, picking from Zoltan, if we are allowed, let's say, we basically, we use our expertise to help in a much faster and more qualitative, let's say, integration of children and youth into their societies and into empowerment, that they can take control over their lives, and they have the opportunities to influence and enhance their communities where they live to. There's many ways that a city, that we can collaborate with cities or local institutions. Just one, from experience of Terre des Hommes, working in different cities where we were welcomed, let's say, and where we were not welcomed, as with our intervention, with our expertise. If you take Thessaloniki, we were working directly with the city administration there to provide accommodation and to provide our expertise in psychosocial support for children and unaccompanied minors and children with families, children and youth with families. So we were there and we were helping the city to do this, which of course it's on our axis of empowerment and resilience. And then we are having a project in Hungary, in Győr, in a very politically contested country, let's say, in terms of refugees and migrants topic. We are having an activity, we're having an initiative, and tools, digital manufacturing tools to empower migrant refugees, but even like minorities, children coming from disadvantaged opportunities, like from minority groups. And we are faced with many challenges because we don't have a space. We don't have the city collaborating with us to offer us a space, to offer us support, to offer us their social services, let's say, to work together. So, there is a contrast in between this. And I think that's the main issue, that cities can, and we can work way much better to achieve a way much better and qualitatively good goal in integrating young people.
Yeah, because beyond let's say the box ticking of what you have to do from a human rights perspective and from a legal perspective, I suppose that this support network is also an access to civil society in the end, and to communities and to life.
Yes.
Once you've gone beyond that status of being a migrant child or whatever. So Liz, maybe can you also comment on that, the experience in Bristol in linking up with these local NGOs, local networks, and how that maybe creates an access to civil society, especially in the UK, as civil society is so active and organized.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was great to hear from Zoltan and Ulsi just then as well. I think what you were saying really resonated. In order for young people to have good outcomes and to integrate well into society, the city and NGOs really need to partner, and neither of us can do it alone. We really need to work together. The city can bring some of the infrastructure, the organisation, but it's often the NGOs who have the volunteer cohorts, the willingness, the ideas, the vision, and together that can be a really positive partnership. I actually want to bring in Jerez to talk a little bit about one of the partnerships we have in the city, which is called Welcome Wednesday, and it's a youth group that's run by an NGO but commissioned by the city, and it's something that I know has had an impact on his life.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Liz. Actually, when I came to Bristol first, it was very hard for me because I didn't know anyone. When I moved from London to Bristol, I made so many friends in London, and when I moved to Bristol, I didn't think I would be able to make friends again because that wasn't an easy start for me. After I was told by foster mom as social worker that there is a place in town, it's called the Welcome Wednesday, is a place for new young migrant where they can gather, when they can make friends, where they can see all around Bristol. And when I went there, that's the first day I went there, and I just made so many friends there. I met people who are the same from my country, but it wasn't from my city. He wasn't from my city, but I made lots of friends from my country, and at that station, at that Welcome Wednesday, it just introduced me to so many people. And at that time, I thought this is what I have been looking for. I had been looking for opportunity that I can meet people and make friends from it, and introduce me to the city and show me around. And at that place, we had every Wednesday, if there was a sunny day, we would go outside for a park, and the people who were volunteering in Welcome Wednesday, they were taking us outside of the place and showing us all around Bristol. We had trips sometimes. Yeah, I think that was quite helpful for me when I first arrived to Bristol.
Yeah, a social element. I think that's it happens everywhere where you're a newcomer. Actually, there is always some sort of social element. If you go to university, there's Freshers' Week where everyone meets for a whole week without studying. It's important to have these social structures for newcomers, for sure. Zoltan, you have a raised hand, please.
Thank you. Just some more examples what a city can do for minors to have a better life in cooperation with NGOs. Of course, what's really useful is to have a consultative forum with NGOs. Even better if the city organizes a council of migrants advising the mayor and the city on issues related to migrants and refugees. The first one, consultative bodies with NGOs. It already started in my city, in Budapest, which is great. It never happened during the previous mayor in the past 9 years with this Fidesz mayor, the governing party's mayor. But with the new mayor, they organized the consultative body for NGOs. But actually the European Union as well is really encouraging countries and cities to have to set up consultative bodies with migrants on the bodies. Really exciting question, and now very important question in Hungary, where the rule of law and democracy is just under the buttocks of the frog, as we say in Hungary. It's very important that we do get access to EU funding directly. So cities have access to EU funding directly and not through the government. That's what many mayors in Hungary are lobbying for at the EU. And just 3 more examples. In Budapest, and of course, any city would have surfaces, offline surfaces on the streets. They would own billboards, they would own surfaces on certain walls, whatever. And it's very important what they present on these walls. And one of these ideas at the consultative forum with NGOs was that we were suggesting to the city of Budapest to have a campaign of humans of Budapest or faces of Budapest, showing migrants, refugees to everyday citizens, that not only white, Christian, boring Hungarians live in this city, but also many different people. So that's we are pushing for such a campaign. Also, another thing, which is, of course, as Liz mentioned as well, cities can offer infrastructure, and it was actually a great thing to hear from the staff of the Budapest municipality at this consultative forum, that they were actually asking NGOs if they needed spaces, offices for new NGOs, and that's great. So of course any city would own such places, and they can decide to rent them or give them for free for a short time to NGOs. And lastly, it's also super important that NGOs in Hungary, actually another great NGO, not us, they are called Menedék Association. They provided updated information about the lockdown rules in Hungary in many languages: Pashto, Dari, Arabic, Somalian, Russian. And it's very important that in an ever-changing lockdown situation, when our government, basically every week they change the lockdown rules, it's super important that this information reaches migrants and refugees, and cities do have a role in distributing such information offline, but also online on their websites as well. That's what I wanted to add.
Yeah, thanks, Zoltan. I see Olsi has a raised hand. I'll go to you right now. Just to say, I would also like to hear from a few other cities. We've heard from Bristol. I think there are a few more cities on the line, so I'll be coming to you straight after to see a little bit examples from your cities on this cooperation with NGOs. I think we're on an interesting thread here. Olsi, go ahead.
So I just wanted to pick on the point that Zoltan made in terms of cities promoting a different way of the community who lives there, by having Faces of Budapest or whoever lives in Budapest to use their offline physical space. It can be very much well done online as well. We at Terra Zom, we had an initiative which unfortunately now, due to reasons of funding, as Zoltan said, this sometimes is the crucial point for NGOs and for NGOs like Terra Zom, but even local ones, to continue their projects and their initiatives, not only a one-year thing, but to continue on a long term. It's funding sometimes. And we had a very successful, for when it ran, an initiative called the Living Together Initiative, where we tried to do just as Terra Zom, but on not only on a local level, but on a European level, where we tried to portray the different faces of young migrants and host community. So we did not only focus on, so our aim was not to focus only on what the face of a migrant who lives in Nuremberg, in Bristol, in Budapest is, and to show their kind of, to go back to this idea, show how a migrant came to Europe and how is he struggling and how the challenges to integrate. No, our aim was to show both a young migrant and the young community talking about experiences, positive or challenges, of course, because there's always both when you talk about integration, when you talk about living in a city, but on both perspectives. So how someone changes and how someone doesn't change, and this was achieved, and this is where I want to go, and then we can continue. This was achieved mostly because we gave the power of, so we actively included both host community and young migrants and refugees who were in Europe to shape this initiative. So it was them who decided what was to happen. It was their active engagement and participation in, let's say, what we call their empowerment and their way of changing stuff. While us as Terra Zom, we were just at the background supporting them financially with the initiative, and providing, let's say, the space virtual or offline space. So I think this is another important issue when we talk about cooperation between NGOs and cities towards migrant youth and children, is that we need to provide a space for their active participation in their own changing or their own, how they see their own way of changing and enhancing that environment and that community. Us as NGOs and as cities, we should provide a space, but we should support and we should it supports their open and democratic involvement, but we should not guide what should be done, because it's, if we want to empower and to build a future with a changed narrative, then we should really listen to the young people and to the children, I think.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's interesting. I would like to hear from a few more cities. I don't want to sort of force people, but as we would have been in Nuremberg, maybe we could go to Emek, and could Emek maybe tell us a little bit about how the city of Nuremberg is organized in its network of support with NGOs? Emek?
Yes, do you hear me?
We can hear you.
I was.
Yeah. No, you would need to unmute. Yeah.
Now I'm unmuted, I think.
Now you're all good. Yeah.
I was kind of fearing that you call me out, because unfortunately, I don't work in the youth department. So I was participating because I'm interested as well in learning more. I can tell that in Nuremberg, it's a whole department that's caring for youth in general. So not only for the unaccompanied minors, but for the youth, all the youth and families. And I know there is a kind of foster family care system. I know that some of the unaccompanied minors are also put in foster families, and they're a big voluntary network in Nuremberg. So there are a lot of voluntary helpers that are caring for them. I don't know if there are any colleagues here that can tell more about it. I thought there was some colleague that would participate from the youth department, but I don't know if they are here. I'm sorry, I can't tell you.
No problem. I mean, sorry to put you on the spot. No worries.
Okay.
I have a raised hand from Katarina. Katarina, if you can also introduce yourself.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Katharina Bamberg. I'm not from a city, so I'm sorry in advance, but I'm actually working at Eurocities as well as a migration policy advisor. I really enjoyed all of your different contributions. I thought it was super interesting. And if you allow me, I would have a couple of questions, which I'm just going to put in the room, and then maybe Jean-Paul can distribute them to people as well. I was wondering about specifically the transition to adulthood and how that works, of course, for migrant children, because we know that there are huge problems with that, specifically also when it comes to public services and how they stop once a child reaches the age of 18. And I was just wondering how cooperation between cities and NGOs can perhaps ensure to make that not happen and to have a continuation of public services. Then another question I would have is whether, specifically for the NGOs, but maybe also for Liz, whether you benefit from EU support and funding in your work, in your different areas of work, or if you have specific needs for support, because obviously that's also something that from Eurocity side, it's always good for us to hear about these things. And then I'm going to add a very short last question, and feel free to, of course, ignore some of these. I would be interested to know how the situation is with undocumented migrant children, for instance, in Bristol, but also in Hungary, because as far as we know, there's often, again, the problem of this group specifically not being able to access public services, which is a huge problem. So thanks. That's all.
Okay, thanks, Katerina. Right, so you're setting us off on three major tracks. Maybe we can start with the transition to adulthood, because we're still in that network of support concept. But it's true that I suppose that there's a lot of support for children, and at one point you get into the scary world of adulthood. Maybe we can start with Liz and Jerez. Actually, I mean, I guess you're in that moment, so it could be interesting to hear from you from the Bristol perspective. Maybe Liz first, and then Jerez for his perspective.
Sure. Yeah. So I can explain a little bit about the structures that try and soften that transition between under 18 and over 18, and make sure that that's tapered off in a more gentle way, and it's not just reaching a cliff edge at 18 and now you're out on your own. So in the through care team, the way that the teams are organised, so that's for young people who are in foster families. The teams of social workers and what's called personal advisors who support care leavers are organised in kind of family groups. So the young person's experience of being supported by the through care team would be that they arrive as an unaccompanied minor, they're placed in foster care, they have a social worker. When they reach the age of 18, their social worker would change, and they would have a personal advisor, but they would be within the same team of people. So they'd have the same manager, the same coordinator, same access to the same support services. So there would be a change in worker, but the system would be very similar. And there's also the opportunity to stay in their foster family beyond the age of 18, which is a relatively recent system in the UK. It's been happening for about the last 5 years, and it's to try and to stop young people leaving home without having all of those independent skills in place, and for it to be a bit more of a supported transition. And then the other thing is just to say about different support services. So a lot of support services are commissioned for 16 to 25-year-olds rather than say 13 to 18 or 13 to 19, to try and bridge that gap. And that happens with some of the mental health services, a lot of the youth services, certainly the statutory service, so the through care service that young people are entitled to, that until 25 if they want it to, but certainly until at least 21. But so that's a bit of the framework, but I'd love to hand over to Jerez to, for a different angle.
Yeah, I mean, how old are you actually?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm 19 at the moment, but at the beginning when they were about to accept my age, they were like a bit struggling with my age, because when I was 15 when I moved to UK, I didn't look like 15, and it wasn't my, it wasn't up to me that I looked older, and there was a bit of struggling. Like the first social worker I had, now everybody else like accepted that I am 15 years old, apart from my first social worker. He didn't believe that I was 50, and I was like, well, I wish I could have a baby face, I wish I was born in somewhere where there is where you don't have to worry about anything, where you don't have to get through any traumatic experience. But this is the way how I came from. It's not my choice that the way I look.
But at 19, it means that you're in this typical transition phase between 18 and Liz was saying there are certain services can extend these concepts until 24, 25. But how do you position yourself there? How do you feel in your own development?
Well, since I moved to Bristol, I'm staying with the foster family. Until now, I'm staying with them. Even now, I'm over age. But after I turned to 18, I had a meeting with my social workers that if I still want to stay with this family or no. And I decided to still stay with them, because there wasn't anywhere that I can go and stay. I didn't want to be around any like random people, because now I'm used to it, to stay with them and learn a lot more from them. And still I'm waiting to get my own property from the Bristol City Council. Well, unfortunately, nothing hasn't come up yet, which is, well, I'm not really urgent, because the place where I stay is quite safe. I think it's quite safe for me, You know, I don't think I'm in urgent to move to another property. I don't want to move.
So the fact that the UK made it possible to stay longer in foster families for you has been a positive element.
Yes, the agreement that has been made for me is I'm allowed to stay here until 21 years old, until I turn to 21, so I'm allowed to stay here.
Okay. One of the elements, I guess, also from child to adult is the link then with the labour market. That could also be interesting out there. I don't know if Sue Lukes is with us from Migration Work. I thought maybe Sue could have some interesting insights there on that transition. If you're with us, Sue. No, okay. But would Ulti? You are.
I am here. Yes, I'm sorry, I was having trouble with tech. In terms of the transition across the UK and what happens at 18, I think it varies between countries, of course, because we do actually have 4 separate countries in the UK, and social services legislation is devolved. So there are different regimes in Scotland, Ireland, Northern Ireland, Wales, and England. I think it's a contested area. I think a lot of people working with, as Harris was saying, I think, a lot of people working with young people find that some local authorities are, very keen to ensure that all the young migrants become, fully fledged members of societies and actually get on in life. But some local authorities, often because they have very few resources, are very keen to get rid of their caseload. And so the 18 transition, although legally there's that protection up until 21 or 25 in England, 25 if you're going into it, if you're in education, it's often a very thin protection, and young people often find themselves without those resources. I think there's a parallel issue, which is that, as in all communities, not just migrant communities, on the community runoff are not necessarily so open to views and needs of younger people. They tend to be run by older people. And so, whereas older migrants may well have ready-made support from community-run organisations representing those communities, young people may find themselves sometimes with less of that help because they're just, because they're different. I mean, especially if they're unaccompanied, they're often not, not necessarily so involved in activities and things like that. And they find themselves in that very difficult sort of situation of trying to maintain their own sense of identity, but it is a new entity. It is a new identity of a young person from wherever, growing up in a new country. Don't necessarily adapt well to that or represent it or fight for those young people. So then but what there are is a whole range of excellent voluntary sector organisations who often work very well with those young people. So I mean, it's a very mixed picture. If you're in a town where the council is sympathetic, where there's strong migrant self-organisation that is open to the needs of young people in their community, and a good voluntary sector organisation to represent them, you will probably have a really, really good transition. But once those elements disappear, the law is there as a baseline of protection, but you have to know about how to find a lawyer and you have to know about your rights, and you have to be able to get legal aid to help you pay for any defence of those rights. And there are very few cases that come up on that basis, precisely because it is so difficult. And young people often will just decide, well, you know what, I'm 18, I have the permission to work, and I will just get on with it. But the big concern, of course, is for young people where they don't get refugee status or any form of asylum once they do become adults. And then very often they're in a very isolated and difficult situation.
Okay, they fall out of the support network at that point.
Local authorities will tend to say you've exhausted European rights, we're not interested, we don't have any legal rights. If you get a good lawyer, they'll fight for you. But if you don't get a good lawyer, you may find yourself by yourself.
Okay, thanks. Because the connection is not great, unfortunately. We got your point that, you know, status can really affect the lives of individuals, and that status does change when they become an adult. So that's an important point. Olsi.
Yeah, so I wanted to continue on this topic because we as Terra Zom actually work our interventions, especially in Greece, Romania, but also Hungary and Ukraine, although it's not EU. We work in Ukraine with like displaced, internally displaced children and youth. But like especially in Greece and Romania, our activities and our initiatives work. We had three initiatives, three projects that work towards the road to adulthood. I mean, in general, Terra Zom considers a young person, even that one from 18 to 24 years old, which then includes all this. But one of our flagship initiatives that we are rolling it globally, but especially in Europe and in Africa, is what we call Fab Labs, which is a fabrication laboratory. So we build different spaces across the route of migration from Africa, but even in Greece, Romania, Hungary, and we want to expand further. And this is a fabrication laboratory is an innovative way to work towards further child protection, youth protection, empowerment, resilience, but at the same time build and develop skills towards employability of young migrants who are especially in Europe, let's say. A Fab Lab is basically a space with several type of digital manufacturing technology. So from 3D printers to CNC machines, which you can produce different type of stuff, to laser cutter, to electronics, to coding. And in these spaces, through the help of professionals, of course, skilled technical professionals, and at the same time, with the help of social workers and our experts on like psychosocial support activities, we work towards on two axes, basically, developing support and developing skills. And in Greece, we had a Fab Lab in Ioannina, next to the to a refugee center there. And in close collaboration with the city of Ioannina, we managed to open a whole center where young migrants who were in transit could gain already skills. And once they would go to, they would move, either stay in Greece, but move to other cities in Europe, then they would use these skills that they had to either register for a technical university or continue further their design or different other careers that they can be. This is quite an innovative way that we try to combine both, and we are preparing, and we have a curricula on this, and we are working to expand it even further, this what we call the Resilience Collective through innovation of Fab Labs, basically. And in Romania, we are doing the same, and in Hungary, we are doing the same. So this is another way that we think it can bridge the gap of further integration into the labor market and employability, and continue further in the integration. So I think this is one of the ways that we can collaborate with across Europe and further, have this tie together to support young people into their desired future careers.
Yeah, because our upskilling is positive, and I suppose that the profile of these types of individuals, of young people, will be a profile of trauma, and so the need to be positive rather than to only talk about support, I would imagine, is even more important maybe with this population. It's not just an average population of people emigrating from one country to another to seek economic opportunity. I mean, we're talking about people with a profound trauma, so it's a different category. Zoltan, to come back to, I mean, I'm going to have to move to a slightly other topic, but to address one of the questions also of Katerina on the undocumented migrant children. Can you comment a little bit on that specific category and the challenges that they face?
Sure, I give it a go. In Hungary, unaccompanied minors would not really stay, you know, they would try to leave Hungary, as of course, similarly to documented migrants. But one example comes to my mind, which I anyways wanted to mention, and this is a good example for undocumented migrants as well, which is and it's also connected to transition to adulthood, because it's an educational program organized by a great initiative in Hungary. It's an NGO. It's called the Open Learning Initiative, or the short term is OLIVE, and they provide educational programs to migrants, refugees, and undocumented migrants as well. And unaccompanied minors as well. So minors can also apply. And what they offer is programs with which migrants can later possibly access higher education. And also OLSI with Terdzom and we at the Helsinki Committee, we also took part at these sessions. So this would be opened for undocumented migrants as well, but trafficking is something which comes to my mind as a huge problem here. So undocumented migrant children would appear certainly on the territory of Hungary, but they would try to stay underground, and then unfortunately traffickers could take advantage of them, which is a huge issue in and of itself. And I passed it over to others who have more expertise on this.
Yeah, I open the floor. I don't know if Liz, do you also have to deal with these issues? Do you have undocumented migrant children as well arriving in Bristol?
Yeah, I mean, I can explain a bit about what we do in the field that I know about, which is we've got a project called the Young People's Project, and it's a branch of an NGO called Bristol Refugee Rights, and they've received some funding to try and resolve young people's insecure immigration status. So that might be a young person who's arrived as an unaccompanied minor, or perhaps they arrived in a family, but their documents were never resolved, and then they are coming up to the age of 18. And in the UK, we've got these very strict cut-off points by the Home Office, and if you miss certain deadlines, it's hugely problematic to try and rectify later. So the aim of their project is to make sure that young people have access to all the legal advice that they can, and are able to resolve where possible their immigration status. Another thing is that the PAs, so that's personal assistants who support care leavers, are now more trained in trying to do what's called triple planning. So planning for a young person to stay if they get their status, or planning for them if they're refused status, or planning if they're given status to a particular age, and making sure that whatever the outcome that's decided by the Home Office, that we're still meeting their needs as best that we can. But yeah, it's a huge issue, definitely.
Okay. I don't know if there's anyone in the meeting that has any further thoughts on this. I don't know if possibly Victoria Dux from the International Organization of Migration, maybe you would have a view. No. Okay. I mean, we have another 5 or so minutes, and I would like to sort of finish off with this notion of youth participation and empowerment, which seems to be a slightly more and forward-looking concept than just the finishing on the support side of things. And I would maybe like to hear from from Liz, from Harez, from Olsi, from Zoltan on how you see this building up in cities. I mean, for me, I would imagine that, you know, giving a role to young migrants in organizations seems to be, a key thing, that they can take on a leadership role, whether it's in a very local situation or in a project or what have you. And I would like to just hear a couple of examples of ideas on this to finish off on a positive, forward-looking note. So I think maybe we'll start like we did with Zoltan, then Olsi, and then I'll go to Liz and Harez afterwards. Yeah. So Zoltan.
Thank you. So what I can tell you is something we want to do next year, and we will do it. We have funding for this, which is an empowerment course for young migrants and refugees. Personally, I will be responsible for this, and this is my love project. And this will be a leadership course on a weekly basis, but also involving something called participatory action research. So 2 pillars: individuals will have skills development, leadership skills, and second, the whole group, which will be hopefully 10-15 people, the whole group will together try to formulate common interests based on which they can conduct a research, a special type of research, which is called participatory action research. And this is actually something which is it's an activity of ours, which is funded by the UNHCR. And this is something we are very much looking forward to. And because we realize that we need to empower young migrants and refugees to become more active. And we want to facilitate this process so then later on they can serve better on consultative forums, consultative bodies, or setting up their own NGOs or any way they wish to.
Yeah, and as you were talking about the advisory role, the consultative role, to build up this network of governance within this community also, yeah, giving it a sense of identity. Okay, thanks. Olsi, I mean, you already mentioned this Fab Lab example and upskilling. I think that would possibly tick my box, but would you have maybe another example or wish or idea that would help support further youth participation and empowerment in the migrant community?
Our work with youth, be it migrant, but be it even local, in general, children and youth, our work, it's really towards empowerment of them to take control over their lives individually, but even over their community. So be it migrant, be it non-migrant. For us, when we give the meaningful participation and opportunities to youth to participate meaningfully, we see that there is an incredible ability of them to really come up with ideas, creative, to show that they are able to really take control of their lives. We work, most of our activities go on this idea that, we need to give not only participation, but meaningful participation, active participation, to give the space to young people and children to really be able to change their future and to work towards everything. For us, empowerment is not only on one project or on one small initiatives. We're trying to give this to really work towards it. That it's part of the discourse and of all our actions, this empowerment of children and youth, that, it's not only one project, but in totality, we need to involve youth at every stage of a project or of an idea, not only in the actions or the activities, but even in the conceptualizing of it. And that's what we do. So we have with the Fab Labs, but at the same time, we have many other initiatives, and I want to point to two ones which are very, very important for us working now in Greece and in Romania and moving towards other countries in Europe when it comes to empowering youth from migrant community. And it's what we call sports for protection and arts for protection. In both of these initiatives and projects that we have, we use sports, we provide a safe and supportive environment, we build opportunities to develop different type of skills, capacity and resources, but at the same time, we give a meaningful engagement and we build this type of leadership in a young person who will work or who will participate in the project. He or she will decide on the work or on the activities that they want. We as adults, or like our colleagues as adults, are just there to support their participation. And there has been great results. It started as a big as a project in Egypt and Iraq in a humanitarian context, and now we are developing it, and we have developed already methodologies, toolkits for professionals and for youth to develop this work towards like how using sports and arts. And arts is another aspect of it. So we develop, we use, as well as Oli said, participatory action research, where young people themselves see the problems, and they are the youth, they are the leader, they build these leadership skills, and they have a toolkit, they have our methodologies, we support them, but it's them who see, and they can see the problems in their communities, they can see the problems in their local, the local communities and everything, and they can build different ways to deal with this, to make it better. So we're there to support, and I think that's our three axis of intervention, let's say, to even strengthen this empowerment as Terre des Hommes in Europe, but not only. So we work on the same kind of methodologies, of course, in Africa, we work in the Middle East, we work in Asia as well on the same kind of methodologies. But this is our three axes. It's like innovation, technology, sports, movement and games, and then arts for protection and integration of youth and migrant children.
Okay. Well, thank you, and good luck for all these projects.
Thank you.
And yeah, and thinking about the personal ultimately of all the people going through your network.
Yeah.
Thanks, Liz.
Well, that was really inspiring to hear all these different projects that are going on. And as you were talking, I was thinking about what we might be able to do in Bristol and how that could translate. So thank you for that. I don't think I've got much more to add in terms of different things. We've got various structures in the City Council, youth forums, councils, young mayors, that sort of thing, which have young migrant representation. But I think there's lots of pockets, and maybe we've got there's lots that we could do in terms of really embedding participation and co-production with young migrants and being empowered. But I want to stop talking and hand over to Jerez again, because he's living some of this, and he's gone on to do volunteering himself. And I'd love. Can I hand over the floor to you, Jerez?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Thanks, Liz. I think in terms of care, if I had an idea, I would say there should be more foster families for unaccompanied migrants who are immigrate to a city or country, because I think staying with the foster family is a safe base for them to recover from traumatic experience that the traumatic experience that they've been through while they were on their way to a new country, and also learning so much from them. They need help from their independent skills and a lot of sort of things, because I think learning independent skills and languages and learning about the area, about the cities in an independent accommodation is not really easy for them. And the main challenges for them is the languages, because that's what every migrant struggle with when they emigrate to a country or city. That's the first thing that they struggle with is the languages. For me, I was quite lucky when I started staying with the foster family. It did really help me with my languages. When I started going to college, I have already experienced something. I didn't have to worry about if somebody asked me, talking to me in English, I can't answer them. I didn't have that. I've already had some experience. And about the Welcome Wednesday, and I have also benefited so much from them, because when I was in London, I was surrounded by some people who were speaking English fluently, and I didn't speak any at that time because I was still quite new in London, and I used to get like bullied, and people used to like laughing at me for the language that I didn't know how to use it. But at that Welcome Wednesday, where I used to be a regular attendant, and now I'm volunteering there, they used to correct my mistakes whenever I was about to talk in English. They used to, like, whenever I was mistaken with speaking, they were correcting it, which is I benefited so much from them, and it taught me that to help other people who cannot speak the language and correct their mistake instead of bullied at them and having a laugh at them.
Yeah. So what I get from you is that the two pillars of a family environment and a social environment were really key for you to start imagining your own personal, professional, whatever development that will come. But these are the two pillars that you rested on.
Yes. Yeah. It was.
So that's really interesting, and thanks a lot for having been with us and to give us these ideas from someone who's also been through this process. I mean, we hear a lot about it, but unfortunately, I mean, it's a lot of figures and numbers, to be honest, and too little times it is actually people and faces. So it's really good to get that perspective. So I think we are now about to close. I will hand over to Feyrouz from the Eurocities network. She's project officer there, and she will give us her conclusions from this meeting. And I would just like to thank Zoltan, Olsi, Liz, Jerez for having shared all of these perspectives. I think it was really interesting. I hope the people on the meeting also got something away from it. I certainly have. So thanks a lot, and I hand over to Feyrouz.
Thank you, Jean-Paul, and thank you to all the speakers from my side too, and from Eurocities side, and thank you, Jean-Paul, for moderating this great discussion. So from my side, I remembered some. I take away with me some ideas, and the first one that I would like to share here is the collaboration between NGOs and cities. And as Liz said, that this collaboration is actually really needed and very effective for to bring out the good outcomes in youth and children, migrant children. And so, yeah, this collaboration could go, as you said, from cities offering infrastructure and funding, and NGOs bringing ideas, volunteers, and all the vision. And we had a nice example with in Bristol with Welcome Wednesday, where we have the social environment that can help the young migrants arriving in a new city. We also had some tips on how cities could work better with NGOs, so to get consultative bodies in the city, consultative from NGO themselves, but also migrants boards and consultative boards for migrants themselves. And one way where NGOs and cities could really work together is on this transition period to adulthood, for the underage becoming an adult. And we saw also good examples with the Fab Labs, for instance, on how to support the young adult to go on the labor market. But I think my main takeaway would be the empowering of the children and the young migrants themselves. And I liked how also you put that children and young migrants are themselves the changers of the future, and that they can change and adapt their environment and change the narratives. And we saw nice example of how to empower and give the voice to the migrants themselves. And even if NGOs and cities work together, like to remember that to give the voice to the persons that are actually in the center of this process. So again, thank you very much for that. I really enjoyed our discussions. For everyone to know, we will have next week during the conference the publication of the report, the Integrating Cities report, and there is a lot of information also in this report on this topic, on what cities are doing to integrate and protect the children and young migrants. So I will invite you to stay tuned for the publication next week. And also we'll put in the chat the link to the whole event, so the other workshops, and also to the main event on 2nd and 3rd next week. So I really invite all of you, if you're not yet registered, to register and to join us for the rest of the event. But from now, thank you very much. It was really, really interesting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a nice day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you also.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.